This portrait, a very likely depiction of Tudor English playwright and poet William Shakespeare, is one of the most identifiable paintings in the world. In fact, it was the first painting donated to the UK's National Portrait Gallery when it first opened its doors nearly 200 years ago in 1856. Moreover, the painting greatly colors what we popularly believe William Shakespeare to have looked like. But is it an accurate depiction? Also, how do we know if it is drawn from life or a fanciful portrayal? Is it a copy? A modern forgery? Who owned it before the National Gallery got it in 1856? Also, has the painting been altered in any way? We'll tackle all these questions and more in this video, but first, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button for more content like this. First, we'll look at the provenance, or, in other words, the chain of possession from the time the portrait was created to today. The first mention of the Chandos portrait was in 1719 by English engraver George Virtue, who claimed it was painted by John Taylor, who was a member of a painters guild called the Painter Stainers Company. This claim of authorship by Taylor is somewhat controversial, yet Virtue believed that Taylor was also an actor and an intimate friend of Shakespeare. The painting was owned by Shakespeare's godson, William Davenant. English theater manager Thomas Betterton bought it from Davenant at some point in the mid-17th century. During that time, the portrait was housed at the Duke's Theatre at Dorset Gardens, a high-end and elite theater house. It was later sold to lawyer Robert Keck. When Keck died in 1719, he bequeathed the portrait to his daughter. Keck's granddaughter, Margaret, who inherited the painting from her mother, married James Bridges, the third Duke of Chandos, in 1736. The portrait stayed in the Chandos family until 1848, when a descendant, Richard Temple Grenville, sold it to Francis Egerton, the Earl of Ellesmere. Ellesmere donated the portrait to the National Portrait Gallery in London for its grand opening in 1856. The Chandos portrait was the first piece of art held by the collection, and it stays there to this day. So what about the dating of this portrait? When was it made? Most historians date the portrait to 1610. The portrait was evidently the inspiration for the Soest portrait of Shakespeare, definitively made around 1646, and the Chesterfield portrait made in 1679. We know the approximate dates for these portraits because we know their creators. Soest was painted by Gerard Soest, born in 1600 and died in 1681. Chesterfield was possibly made by Peter Borsler, who was born in 1634 and died around 1690. Other older, possible portraits which could depict William Shakespeare also exist, including the Sanders portrait, reputably painted by Shakespeare's neighbor, John Sanders. It has been dated using tree ring dating of the wooden frame, infrared tests and radiographic tests of the paint and radiocarbon tests of the label, as well as ink tests on the label. All tests date it to around 1603, when Shakespeare was 39 years old. If true, the Sanders portrait, like the Chandos portrait, could be two depictions of William Shakespeare during his lifetime. Now, another question is, does the Chandos portrait actually depict William Shakespeare? The debate is whether or not it is actually a depiction of the great bard or someone else. Well, it resembles a Droeshout engraving from the frontispiece of Shakespeare's first folio, published in 1623. The Droeshout engraving was known to be a portrait faithful to the likeness of Shakespeare, according to many who knew him in life, including his friend and rival, the English poet and playwright Ben Jonson. The Chandos portrait also resembles Shakespeare's effigy in his grave monument. The monument and effigy were made before 1623 at the request of Shakespeare's loved ones, who obviously remembered what he looked like and probably had portraits or visual representations of him to use as a reference. So here's another question. Was the portrait ever altered or changed in any way? There have surprisingly been several changes made to the Chandos portrait, as we'll see. The hair has been lengthened and the beard has been lengthened and pointed at the chin. The varnish used by early restorers has discolored over time and covered the original pigments. According to art historian Joseph Parker Norris in his 1884 book, Portraits of Shakespeare, quote, "The painting has been very much scrubbed and has been injured by injudicious cleaners and restorers." According to British Army Captain J.R.P. Purchas, writing in Edward Walford, John Charles Cox, and George Latimer Apperson's Antiquary Collection in 1905, quote, "These alterations, however, are not complete, although very considerable. They include a reduction in the breadth of the right side of the forehead and right cheek, and apparently the size of the chin, the beard added, the mustache and hair altered, and the whole of the dress and groundwork repainted, so that nothing is left of the original picture but a portion of the mask." Quote, "There has been some alterations of the forehead, evident from brush marks, and the outline from the crown of the head to the right eyebrow, which should be well defined, being ragged and indistinct. The hair has very little resemblance to nature, the greater part of it having been repainted. It is nearly all of one tone, without any indication of light and shade, and is in very much the same state, allowing for age as when it was repainted. The greater part of the ear was originally seen and can be made out through the repainted hair. The appearance of smallness about the chin is due either to rubbing before the painting of the beard or to the opaque gray color with which the collar has been repainted and carelessly carried over, the point of the chin showing through. With regard to the beard and mustache, besides being badly painted, without the proper variations of light and shade, the shadows have been entirely omitted. The dress has all been repainted with thin color, though not materially altered, and the original double collar strings can just be distinguished as being more than twice their present length, terminating with tassels, as generally worn at the period. They are now too short to be of any use. So to conclude, the Chandos portrait was painted around 1610. It most likely is a faithful portrait of the bard William Shakespeare. We will probably never be any surer about if it's Shakespeare or not than we are now. It has a long provenance, entering extant written history in 1719 through George Virtue. The portrait may have been the inspiration for other 17th century depictions which were definitely posthumous. Imagine depictions of Shakespeare by the likes of painters Gerard Soes and Peter Borsler. Finally, the portrait has been altered, scrubbed, and repaired irresponsibly and haphazardly. And that's the Chandos portrait. What do you guys think? Do you expect it to be altered? Did you originally think it was a modern fake? Let me know all of your takes on the portrait in the comments. Also, comment on which artifact I should do a video on next. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. This has been Kay with Lost Libraries. Until next time, peace.